Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I am starting to get a little chilly.
You are getting a little chilly. Now, I've got to admit, when I first saw that, I thought that was Everest because it looks like it from one of the views. But once I saw the church, I knew it was probably something Nordic. And you have said it's Iceland.
It is. It's Iceland. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I think without the church, it would really resemble Everest. That's incredibly beautiful.
Incredibly beautiful, but also massive. Think about
Yes.
what's underground level for that mountain.
And I've told you before, this is when I start hearing from my sister who's saying, why do you always make me so cold in the wintertime by giving me these cold pictures? Why not? Why can't I have sunny beaches?
Okay,
Which I'll
we'll,
have to
we'll
find out
walk
her
going
favorite sunny
forward.
beach and give her a sunny beach in the cool winter weather. Agentic AI.
A massive, confusing, conflicting topic that everyone is having to deal with now. And we're going to try to, over the course of a number of videos, yes, there are your notes for this
Yeah,
video,
yes, they go
uh,
on very long.
bring, if not some sense to it, at least try to explore it from the point of view of a board chair and a CEO. And why don't you explain what we're doing, Tom?
This is our board debate series. This is the first of the three videos. This is the actual discussion, as you said, between um, a lead investor, a lead board director, the board chair, and a CEO. And in this particular one, Deirdre's going to take the role of the CEO of the company, and I'll be the lead investor, the lead board director, board chair. And it's about agentic AI, but what we're going to play, and as Deirdre has reminded me a few times here, will appear naive in some of these discussions because we have to. And we spend an awful lot of time on these subjects. So we have perhaps a broader view or a deeper view in places than people might otherwise have. So we're going to try to play as best we can the way we think it would go. But what we're going to find is this quickly evolves into something very different and way broader and deeper than just agentic AI or the use of agents, AI agents in the enterprise. So with that, do you have any comments, Deirdre, you'd like to make before we get into this?
Just two quick ones. The first is that we may, even though going to be role playing, we're engaging in a conversation, we may jump out of character from time to talk through why we're making a point. And again, we're doing this to try to explain what people are facing right now, board chairs, CEOs, other executives, and so forth, when even discussing this topic. Second point is you use the word naive. I'd take it further and say something that no professor really should ever say is that we may not look so smart here, but what we are doing is, I mean, assure everyone that you and I, Tom, know what we're talking about. But when we're role playing, we're going to be playing the roles of people who might not know, who may be confused. And so we may, as when in character, not look confused. I'll put it that way. With that, Tom, over to you to start the conversation.
And to finish your discussion, I mean, I've, you and I have been dealing with the subject of AI since generation one of AI, which is many, many years ago, and continued on. And I'll never forget the point where a few years ago, somebody was telling me that I really didn't understand the subject very well. He did because he understood Microsoft's approach. And that was what, 3 years ago, maybe, or maybe longer. Um, so it's a very confusing topic, which we'll prove. So with that, I will begin. So Deirdre, you asked me to when you called me, you said you wanted to talk about the subject of agentic AI or the use of agents in the company, and asked me to pull the board about the subject because you wanted to talk about what your strategy was and actually have them support you. I think I got that right, right?
Correct.
So I did. I had a very interesting conversation. So you can't believe what I heard. I heard things like, this is becoming a very controversial and deeply unpopular subject. That was from one of the board members. I heard another one say, can I trust Sam Altman? Meaning, what are the implications to ChatGPT? I heard another one say, my kids now have access to PhD level knowledge with MBA level business cases. How do they learn anything using this stuff, and how can we expect to properly use it in the enterprise? A lot of work needs to be done there, dude. I heard another one saying, I saw Elon Musk on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about truth seeking being the most important objective. And if we don't have our AI models seeking truth, we're going to run into big problems, and created a kind of I happened to see that same podcast, and it was interesting. I took away a very different view of it than this board director. And I'm not telling you who these are, dude, because I don't want to speak out of turn for them. I did get one that said, look, AI is causing layoffs, and it's going to be a huge deal, and we're going to see huge disruptions in our workforce. And he used the example, or actually it was she used the example of Amazon, and saying, look at the recent layoffs that Amazon's announced. And even though they weren't specific, it was clear to me that they're driven by the use of AI in the enterprise in Amazon. And as you know, we both know that they've been using AI-like algorithms for how many years, right? Double digits for sure. And so has Google. So it's a lot of varying views that I know, because I've got some, as you know, I've spent a fair amount of time on the subject, and I kind of know what these mean. But boy, I don't know how. Let me tell you what I'm worried about. Here's what I'm worried about. We'll get into this board discussion. You'll start talking about agentic AI and how you envision it, and what you'd like to, the decisions you'd like to make, and the strategic moves you'd like to make with that within the organization. And I'm worried that this kind of context is going to create a distracted discussion, and maybe one of those continuous discussions that's going to take us down various rabbit holes, and we'll end up chewing up the board meeting, and we won't get anywhere. And as a result, you'll miss the time chance you have. You'll end up then not taking advantage of your ability to get ahead of this thing. And I worry that it's going to slow you down. And you and I both know what that means. It'll cause you to perhaps get distracted, miss something in the marketplace, all those things. I don't want to have happen. So I found out an answer. I don't think that's what you expected I would find, or maybe it was what you expected. But that's what I found. So
Fascinating information, because I've talked with my fellow CEOs and they've been saying the same sort of thing, that the whole topic of the use of AI has become part of an overall societal discussion and business discussion about the concept of artificial intelligence, about what various companies are doing, about the fears that they hear. I hear the word, distress about what AI is doing to children, distress about the taking over of social media. In other words, so much is bundled in there. What fascinates me, and I'm saying this to you as a board director, and you know very well what board director responsibilities are, is I'm not hearing anything in relation to our use of AI within the business, or about some of the general board responsibilities in relation to business generally. Issues like governance, like finance, like results, like investor relations, and so forth. And so, what I'm trying to do here as CEO of an organization is sort through all of this. Am I going to, when trying to implement AI in an organization, have to deal not only with the implications for the organization, but also for the implications outside of the organization? And that's something that puts an extra onus on us as members of the organization in terms of getting this right. And then what getting it right means is up in the air. I read the business media, listen to the business media daily, keep up with things, talk with a lot of people about it, and I am not finding one strategy that is said to pay off for everyone, or one course of action that's safe, or one way to approach things. Meanwhile, I'm stuck with the whole issue of, well, two issues. One, we know that AI in all its forms is now being embedded in our general business software. What are the implications of that for governance, for risk, for some of those basic board concerns? Similarly, I have no doubt that a substantial proportion of our employees are already using AI or various AI models in one form or another. Now, what does that mean in terms of governance and risk and our ways of doing business and our culture? These are the sorts of things that are keeping me up at night, and I was hoping to get direction from the board. It almost sounds as if you as board chair, me as CEO, have to figure out what we're going to form to bring to the board so that we can all together come to a sense of how we're going to approach this for the organization. Let me stop here and see how you're reacting to that.
I don't think you're wrong. Um, I think that we've come to a point, I think, where boards have to be. I'm coming to the conclusion boards have to become completely literate about this subject.
Yeah.
So unlike in the past, Deirdre, where in many of the companies I know you've led or that I've been on the board of, we've always expected that there'd be one board member that would have this kind of tech competence, would be um, up on cybersecurity or up on the latest capabilities. And then we relied on whoever the top tech talent was in the organization to supplement that. I am coming to the conclusion that the traditional board member of these companies, unless you're sitting in one of the tech hubs and they're all part of that, they're all investors in tech and they all have that capability. That's going to have to change. You're going to have a base level of knowledge in this. Because to me, I mean, I was trying to make um, a list of things that I think we should talk about the implications of in the organization. They span from are is are AIs just talking about AIs as use cases even valid anymore because it's so inherently, and you said this in just a second ago, it's being it's being incorporated into so many things. Use cases no longer may not be a valid concept that it's so embedded. I think was the word you used, or at least I've heard
Correct.
you use in the past.
Yes.
Then there's the issue of AI and its ability to then do things beyond soft things in robotics. And you combine AI and robotics, or reasoning and robotics, or inference models and robotics, and then you combine that with any aspects of AGI, not full human AGI, but aspects. What are those implications, and what does that mean for us as a company? Much less, I'm trying to stay away from the society, right? That's another whole implication. But then the issue of bias and culture and trust. And I mean, how does that, when you said to me just a sec, and by the way, this is not, I don't mean, I mean, this is a discussion right now. But I heard you say, well, I'm confident the vast majority of our employees of the company are using ChatGPT on the side to answer their own questions, whether they're business or personal. Is that the source we want as a source of knowledge for the company? How does that perhaps influence the culture of the company? And the way the company, as you said, the way the company does business. Um, and then just how do people think about the use of AI? Do they think about it as a source of capability or knowledge that they use as a tool? Or do they think of it as a source of leadership? Right? I mean, where do they put it, right? I know that you know the way I think. You have to stay ahead of all the models. You have to lead the models. Don't fall and let the model lead you. I think that gets you into big trouble all over the place, whether it's personal or professional. And then finally, what does it mean from a buying decision? So if you take this down, by the way, these are just my thoughts, and I know you want to take them on. I'm sure you want to take them on independently, but Deirdre, what does it mean for you in terms of, or us in terms of buying decisions? Okay, what does the company decide their frameworks are going to be for making decisions about these capabilities going forward? And do we have to build these concepts or these thought processes into our buying decision? And then a concept that I know you know that I care about and I know you care about is what are the motivations of the marketplace that we're facing? I know you think I'm just fire hosing here because I've got a big mountain behind me, but
No, this is how the conversations are going these days. I've heard this from my fellow CEOs. And off to the side for our listeners, I'll say that what you're hearing right now is actually what conversations sound like if you sit down with people in executive positions these
yeah, if
days.
we go out of
No,
character for a minute, this is what you and I are hearing from
yes,
some of the top thinkers
right.
in the field of investing in tech, CEOs in tech, CEOs in Silicon Valley that are investing billions of dollars in these companies. These are the kind of subjects we're hearing. We're not making this up. This is the stuff. And
No.
so it causes you to say, and Deirdre, spend a second, and maybe we go back into character and you say, look, let me just tell you what I'm seeing in the marketplace from so
Okay.
let's step back into the role.
Let's step
Okay.
back into character, and I'll say, Mr. Board Chair, you're reflecting what I'm hearing not only out in society, but also from the people within my company who are very, very scared right now for a number of reasons. One is the whole idea of this AI stuff. It's almost like every day you wake up and there's a new form of AI that everyone says we're supposed to be implementing in the company. How do we keep track of that? As you know, we're already doing some process automation. We already have robots in various parts of the business, and people feel generally comfortable with that sort of thing. People feel comfortable with some of our machine learning models. But now, over the past year or so, all of a sudden, the use of LLMs is just exploding. You mentioned ChatGPT. That's not the only one being used in this company. People are using Anthropic and Grok, and certainly Copilot's embedded, and Gemini people like as a search engine, and all of these other models without coordination among them. And that, of course, drives executives crazy because if people are getting information from different sources and trying to pull it together, you start to lose cohesion in terms of the documents within an organization. But then it goes further, and all of a sudden, everything is about agentic AI. Now, AI agents, as you know, are literally software systems that can accomplish things on their own and deliver results autonomously. So the claim is, I mean, you and I have a lot of feeling, you and I have had conversations about this whole human machine partnership, which doesn't go away when you're dealing with these AI agents. But it goes beyond that. Every day I read in the business press that I, as a CEO, am supposed to be creating an architecture involving all sorts of these agents, combining to run all of the processes in my company. This is the sort of thing that gives CEOs and boards ulcers because it's almost impossible to conceive of this given the status of the company right now, given the status of the marketplace right now. Let me circle around when mentioning the word marketplace. You mentioned earlier that we're hearing that there's a lot of dislike of AI among our customer base out there. They don't trust it. They don't know how to read the results of it. They don't know when they're interacting with a bot or with a person, or they don't know when results they get are a real answer, or is it a hallucinated answer, or what? Tremendous lack of knowledge and understanding, which I understand because that's the fire hose that we're all getting of information from all sources, from the tech companies, from consultants, from academics, and so forth. So I, as CEO, am coming to you saying that I know that we have to move forward with the use of AI in our company. And I need board support for whatever strategies I develop. So, what is the position we're in? But before I throw this back to you, let me tell you why I think I have to go to the use of AI agents or for the use of LLMs officially in the business, not just our people using LLMs, but officially using LLMs for decision making, document synthesis, all of those great uses of that, but also to AI agents. And that is, if you read the business press, you read a lot of conversation about the use of AI agents as a competitive advantage. And I'm not quite sure I understand why it would be a competitive advantage now, because this is supposed to go beyond the basic productivity gains you get and what that means for the bottom line. But it's supposed to mean that you deliver your services and products better through the use of AI agents. That is something I believe the tech companies have to prove to me as a skeptical CEO, not quite knowing what to do here. Um, but there's another aspect to this. Another of the conversations that I keep hearing is about the difference between using one AI agent for a specific purpose and then using multiple AI agents to drive things, to combine for different results. And some people say when you're starting to do this, you've got to start with one AI agent. Look for a place where certain functionality can be replaced and go with that. Other people are saying jump right in and you only see the whole value when you combine a lot of agents to oversee your entire processes. And I just don't know how to handle this. I'm speaking now as the CEO here. I have my opinions as a professor, but anyway, speaking as CEO. But what I also need from the board here is a sense of all of the governance issues. How are you perceiving risks? That's another thing that I keep hearing about, that with every use of AI, the risks multiply. And whenever you combine two AI models, basic LLMs, or certainly two AI agents, the risks just explode. So is the board even thinking about this? Have you had board conversations about this? Please enlighten me.
So I'd like to come back to the point that says I don't think the board uh, has the equality of fundamental knowledge it will need to be able to make these decisions or to make those comments to you. When we're done, we have to decide what piece needs what action. I don't want to prejudge, but um, I think we have to decide what kind of board do we want. I've been part of boards where the investors want to drive it to one thing. They don't want people with outside views. They don't want people with strategic insight. They don't want to be brought forward too far. They want to just focus on what gets done today, tomorrow. I've also been parts of boards where they do want that.
Mhm.
So it depends on what kind of governance we want. I need to do work on my side. I need to look to the investors beside my own firm and decide what kind of governance do we really want from this firm? Do we want this firm to be dealing in these things? Excuse me, board. What kind of board do we want? What kind of responsibilities do we want from that board? Um, and as you know, they're very unceremonious, meaning when they decide they don't need you anymore, they just let you go. We obviously have that ability, but we don't have the ability to deny one of the investors a seat. It may be the person in that seat doesn't fit anymore for what we need. I do not want to prejudge that yet. What I will say is that I'm going to come out of this saying that we need to educate the board to a certain base level of knowledge about these subjects and make sure everybody has the same set of starting point knowledge, because I do not believe, based on my phone call, that we have board members that sit at that level. And to ask them to weigh in on these issues of governance about these issues is not fair to them. And it's also not fair to us. We're not going to get the quality of result we expect. So I think I'm going to recommend an education session. Now, I do understand we can't slow you down, so we'll have to do something quickly. We are approaching holidays. We're always approaching holidays, whether they're winter holidays or summer holidays or whatever. But we'll have to accelerate that process. So I don't think I can answer that question except with a plan. And I'll have to commit to a plan. So at the end of our discussion today, we'll zero in on what do we do next. But in some way, we'll have to say to ourselves, the board has to have a certain set of knowledge about certain pieces of this AI architecture, not just AI models in their names, but the architecture itself. We'll have to come up with how much do they need to understand bias and what it means. We're probably going to have to come up with some point about understanding at least the fundamental models that are out there that are available to us to be used. The, you know, consumer models, the B2B models, the coding models, because remember, there's a whole series uh, of companies that supply coding models to our engineers who do this kind of work, right? Can actually make coding and do make coding. I shouldn't say can make, do make coding an automated process for process automation. So or create a process automation of coding. And then there's the whole buying decision, which is ultimately what a board should help you with, is what are the criteria for buying these things. I think this comes back, Deirdre, to saying that I think we're quickly discovering this is a key inflection point of change. This is a key inflection point of change. So much like we could look in the past of some of our experiences and say, perhaps we've gone through one of these before. Um, and depending on your generation, you may not have even been part of it, right? But I think when we engaged the use of the broad-based use of the internet, we experienced this similar change that was as massive as this change.
Mhm.
And it caused a whole different approach to who fit where and what was the base knowledge and would people be willing to invest to learn
Mhm.
and adapt. So that's a long answer to the question you asked me. When and how can I get an answer to my question if I want to move the board forward with a strategy? I'd like to take that strategy to the board for a judgment. And I would say what I said at the beginning, end up with a very distracted discussion and a very convoluted and circular and time wasting and not to the point. So, we've been talking about this for a half hour, Deirdre, and we've not made, I mean, have we made any progress toward answering your question?
Um, what we're doing is clearing the ground so I can start to ask my question. But
Okay.
I don't know that we have finished clearing the ground. What
Okay.
we're really talking about is that we, as an entity, an organization, and a board, have to do a lot of work to position ourselves to take advantage of, and I hope that's the right term, to use and benefit from the use of an advanced and emerging technology here. And you're talking about what the board has to do. Let me throw some things out that I've been thinking about we have to do in our organization, which may actually affect what you talk with the board about or figure out whether the right people are there. You're talking about the right board members? Well, do I have the right C-suite?
Mhm.
That all of them terrific people. I'm not sure that my CFO understands how to handle the economics of AI because AI changes the economic structure of an organization. I know you all like him because he's terrific at generating financial reports, at dealing with investors and so forth. Very important skills. But do we need a strong deputy in there specifically with the ability to work through the economics of AI? This is a board decision here. I'm not entirely sure that our chief marketing person is the right person anymore for doing this work. Same with sales, because once you start to introduce these agents into an organization to pick up specific tasks, all of the processes and all of the work of the organization changes, specifically in the areas where there are tasks that can be accomplished by agents, which may wind up changing the jobs of the individuals there. And this may be a key that for you to ask yourself when working with the board. If my C-suite doesn't fully understand AI and AI agents, or if your board members don't, then how can we fulfill our responsibilities in relation to the organization? That can I keep someone who's, for example, a terrific sales manager who refuses to start to use some of the AI agents in sales work? What does that do for the organization as a whole? How does it interrupt processes? What does it do for the image of the organization in the marketplace? These are serious discussions. These are key people who have done very well by the company. And now we're talking about, are they capable going to the next level? I don't know. I don't know. Something I keep asking about myself all the time. Like, am I capable of pushing this further? Maybe I need a really strong CTO in here who can drive all of the technology. But beyond that, let's start to talk about all of our processes. I mentioned before that the business press, business media, is pushing strongly the idea of using AI agents in conjunction to run all of the processes of a company. Well, what has to happen for you to get the processes in shape so that they can be coordinated by a bunch of AI agents? There has to be a significant amount of work there, given all of the various processes in the company. And this is work I'm not even sure if I went to the owners of these processes, and I said to them, well, prep your process for use by AI agents, whether they would have any idea what I was talking about here. And my guess is that one, you would have different interpretations, and therefore the coordination issue would get even worse, not better, along these lines. While we're talking about people, let's talk about the entire team here. That it's not just the C-suite, it's all of the levels of managers who drive the processes, who will implement the work, who form their part of the human-machine partnership with all of these agents, who assess the results of the work generated by the AI agents to make sure that it's right and doing appropriate things for the organization. What has to happen there? Do I have the right staff here? How much turnover do I have to have? If indeed I have to have turnover, can training cover all of this? These are serious issues. What skills do I need? Implicit in all of this also is a change in the organizational structure. If we're having AI agents, for example, control all of our processes, surely that must do away with various silos within the organization. And I'm not quite sure how that would work. If that would work, what that would do for the executives in charge, what that would do for the personnel. But that's something we truly have to think through. We probably have to change the basic structure of how we get work done. You and I have talked previously about how some of our basic uses of AI, the process automation, the robotics, even some of the machine learning, has changed the substance of work. Now that we're starting to talk about moving to higher level uses of AI, how much further does that change the substance of the work? Um, More concerns about culture. How in the world do you change a culture that we've taken decades, you know this, decades in building, change it quickly to accommodate this new way of learning? And what does that do with our interactions with all of our audiences, with our supply chain, with our platforms we operate on, with our partners, with our customers, heaven knows? How does it affect us in our status vis-a-vis competitors? And I'm talking about the easy things here, believe it or not. These are things that we can figure out. It's just going to take a lot of work so that while you're working on the board, we have to do some significant work here, even while we are continuing to do our profit-making work out in the marketplace. But then and we get to the really hard issues. What I think the really hard issues are is all of the governance surrounding this and the risk, the cybersecurity, the investor relation, the regulations, the results, especially financial ones. And these are things that I'm just not hearing any useful information about. So I've just dumped a lot of my concerns on you, but you're board chair. You're supposed to deal with these concerns. So how are you going to respond to my concerns in your role as board chair?
Your day will come. That's how I respond, dear. Your day will come. So you will have to be board chair soon.
Okay.
Uh, so I think, Deirdre, that we come back to because if we're not careful, we can get lost in the forest.
Yes,
Um, and I think we could just have done this to ourselves. Um,
that's what I'm afraid of.
yes. Uh, so, as sitting CEO and a former CEO, um, I think we have to go back to what is that fundamental? The fundamental is you rely on the individual because ultimately it is the individual that carries you through. And we hear this almost universally when we listen to people, not just currently, that really thinks through this subject carefully, but also those who have done this historically in the past through many, many years, all the way back through the classical period, that it is the ancient period. It is the individual who truly makes things move forward in the world, at least as we perceive it, assuming we're not in a simulation, which kind of makes you wonder a bit based on things that are going on. Regardless, it's the individual. I think we have to look back and say, how did we become comfortable with this technology? It's because we have been using it for years in whatever form it existed. And then when it started to make progress again, we started using it right away. We have people that we've been acquainted with, people we've been working with who talk it but don't do it. Now they're starting to do it, but they're still way behind the curve because they're using the wrong models because they're not comfortable with it all. Or they're using a model that's built for the consumer side when they're really trying to do B2B things. I think we have to rely on the individual. I think we have to say, look, we have to you have to learn how to use this stuff. Because the only way that you're going to get comfortable with the issues that we're surrounding ourselves with is you use it. So I think you have to make sure your individual your C-level people, your leaders, use it. They use it in their work. They show you that they do. You see how they use it so that you can be comfortable that they're then applying that same level of thinking to their leadership. Because without that, you're lost. This is the same thing that we believe that we have to see in almost everything. The leader has to have done it. The best leaders have always done it in some way. At least that's my belief and founded on everything I know. I think we have to rely on that because otherwise the problem becomes too big to solve. And I think if you did like what we should do, what you're going to do it, and I'll do it. I'll get the board together and say, look, I'll lead you to water. You all have to start using this. And to the degree that you start using it, you will then start to become curious. You'll then start to become knowledgeable. You'll start to create this learning process, this learning wheel, right? That will cause you to then be able to contribute appropriately to helping you lead this company strategically. That's your worry is how can I lead this company strategically? I mean, you're a technologist, Deirdre. I have no doubt you can do this. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the people around you. Just like you're worried about the people around me, the board directors. Are they up to the job? And I don't want to put you in front of them with a strategic decision on the direction of the company and your plan for implementing when they aren't ready to actually make a judgment. Just like you don't necessarily want to come forward and put your team in front of the board because you're not sure your team is ready to implement. I think we have to approach it that way. I think the real question then becomes, okay, if we agree on that, let me just take it to the how do you do it phase.
Please, yes.
Okay, I don't see anything coming out of traditional institutions that we normally look to help us that's going to do
No,
this. I just don't see it
no.
because all I see is coming from my own, and I'm speaking both in and out of character here, coming from my own alma maters, right? Or is that plural, Dira? I don't, or is it,
Uh, yes, but yes, use the English plural, which is
okay,
alma maters, rather
rather
than
than the
put
Latin plural.
the Latin endings.
Okay.
So,
But I'm not seeing anything coming at me from continuing education, from exec education, coming out of the business school, coming out of our former schools, tech schools, that are showing anything, even out of my liberal arts undergraduate school, coming that are showing me anything but words, agile leadership, Sorry, that was a visual cue that it's, I've heard it too many times before.
Yes.
It's not about agile leadership. This is about leadership with a fundamental of technology in the moment. Um, so I don't think we can rely on that. I think we have to just create the environment somehow that we lead the charge. I think you have to lead the charge in the company, and I'll lead the charge with a board. But I think that's where we are. And if we don't have people that step in and do it quickly, we're going to have to ask them to self-select because they're in the way. They will then do the same thing downward, meaning your team will start doing that downward once you do this. Now, I've said a lot for the last 10 minutes or so, so I want to now just stop and let you respond to that. But when I'm trying hard to figure out how do you deal with this,
Yeah.
I think it has to come back to the individual.
Um, I think what we're working for, and I'm going to just step out of character for a minute and
And
say
I can
that
drink some
we're
cold, some
cold
cold,
call,
hot, used to be hot yesterday coffee, right?
enjoy.
Which I know offends you terribly. So,
Just step out of character for a minute and say, we're going to work to a conclusion of this discussion, but then come back in our real characters to say a few final words. So back in character as the CEO. It sounds to me, Mr. Board Chair, as if you're working toward a plan of forming an education cultural discussion with your board members. And that I have to do the same thing at my end to stop waving my hands and stop panicking. But I have to start to talk with my C-suite, with other knowledgeable people in the company to get a real picture of what's going on and what we can do. And then we should probably get together when we've had these initial conversations and then plan how we're going to move forward, a real plan about how we're going to develop a plan for a strategy and a plan for the company and how we will work with the board to make sure that all of the board responsibilities and all of their sensibilities are aligned behind the strategy we put together. Does that sound like a good course forward?
yes, it does. I think as as you and I always say, time is either your enemy or your friend. I don't think time is our friend here. Um, in some ways, let me just say it this way. I think time is our friend because I think there are many companies that are going to be facing the same problem. I think time is an enemy if we want to be out in front.
Mhm. I think you're right about time. I'd put it slightly differently that we are going to have the time to do it, but that in relation to the markets and our investors, we have to make the point that we are starting to do it so
Yes.
that we answer that initial question, that we are standing up and paying attention and we're working our way toward using this very much commented on emerging technology of AI agents.
So I think on the sense of messaging, this is something I know you tell me all the time in and out of character, that you're frustrated with many people these days who fail to, what do they call it? They bury the headline in the
Yes,
message, right? They don't use the headline as the headline. That Deirdre, as your leadership, you've been using AI in the company for years. You just have been using it in process automation throughout the company to improve productivity,
right,
starting with supply chain and
right.
working all the way through. You're using it. The question is, have we highlighted that as part of our future strategy? No. So I think I would encourage you to think about um, separating the strategy, saying, we've been involved in the use of AI in our company for many years. It was backroom facing away from the customer. We're now going to move it more toward customer facing activities. We'll take very careful steps forward. we'll make sure they represent what we want, mostly because out of character, you and I have personally experienced agents going rogue,
Yes,
telling
we
us
have.
to cancel our to stop doing business with a company as the best alternative to
Right.
achieve our goal when we didn't want to. We weren't even asking to. We were just asking for some help. And it said, you know what? Your best alternative is to just cancel. That way you'll get your money back. We're going, no, 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 no. We want to. No, your best alternative is to do it. So I did it. I got my money back. Now they're coming back with the offers, and now I'm going to be able to do what I wanted to do in the first place. So it's nuts. Regardless, we want to make sure that before we start to do that within the company, that we're doing it in character of what is that customer facing culture that we want, and is the agent's um, independent action, right? Is that, or autonomous action, is it in line with that? As you and I both said, had that been demonstrated through the process of testing to the high levels of people within that company, they would never, ever have allowed that, because their fundamental point is service to high-end individuals who have discretionary income to spend on that type of a product, right? So we need to be sure that it is properly representing the culture we want to be as our customer-facing culture. And this is the thing that is concerning me as much as anything, Deirdre. I just don't know how many of our board members really understand the fundamental issue behind bias in AI models and how they differ so dramatically. Um,
A
and
serious governance issue there. And
and
this,
and so one thing that might be helpful out of character is that you think of governance in a much broader way than many do. Many think of governance politically speaking, right? So they think of lawfare and they think governance, they think of just, you know, shutting down the government and, political. When you talk about that, it's who your definition and my definition for business governance is really just who gets to make what decisions.
who
And
gets to make what
how high
decision?
do those decisions need to go in
But
the
it's
organization?
also what decisions the board makes in relation to certain key topics. I've
Yeah.
mentioned risk, things like risk, cybersecurity, financial success of the organization, having the right top level executives in place.
Yes.
All of this has to do with the governance of the entity, which
Yes. It's
is
the
has
governance
nothing to
model of
do
the
with the
entity.
political
Right. So
governance.
when you think about it, it's things like who sets what for the company, who, and I simplify it to who gets to make what decisions, but meaning that you set the objectives, but you take them to the board for ratification. And it's just this waterfall of who gets to make what decisions in the company. And I think your point about governance is, to me, is that look, if you're talking about the context of the way I run the company is changing under my feet right now. If
Correct.
that context is changing, then this waterfall of decisions has to be changing because the decisions themselves are changing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely right. And this, and I'm in character now as the CEO, this, Mr. Board Chairman, is one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you early to
Right.
make sure that the board was going to be aligned with the work that we're doing here, the C-suite here, in relation to moving our company into the technology future. As we
Nothing is more frustrating for an operating CEO like you than to have the company be moving strategically and the board believing they have the right to make certain decisions and you thinking you've picked up that right in this change of strategy. And having that, there's no better way for a CEO and a board to get sideways and the CEO to be fired.
Mhm.
There's no better way. I've had it happen to me. And so, you're perceiving it correctly, that as you start to move this company forward dramatically in the way things are done because of the leverage this capability is giving your company
Mhm.
to now start to be able to use this. And it's going to change the way you do things, and not only the way you do them, but what you do.
Right.
It's going to demand that a different decision waterfall table be created between the relationship of the board and decision making in the company. And
Mhm.
that has to parallel what you're doing. And that's your point about governance. And so people can misunderstand that term. You and I use it the way we intend, which is this: who gets to make what decision in the company, and what are those decisions, right? And those slate of decisions are very different for tomorrow. And that's your point that you're making, is the game changes and it's changing underneath your feet.
Mhm. So I think we have our game plan, Mr. Board Chair, as
So
CEO.
let's just repeat. So repeat to me what you think we've
What it
said.
is that you will work with your board to bring to them the concerns that you and I have been discussing in terms of their role, their level of knowledge, and figure out what is needed to help move them into a position where they can do good governance. Do we need to train the board? Do we need to replace certain board members? Do we need to do what? That's in your hands. On my side, I will work with my C-suite to put together an initial strategy and execution plan. I think when you're talking about implementing a new technology like this, you cannot, or let me put it this way, you must make sure that your execution plan is created absolutely in alignment with the strategy, so the right things happen, so that we can bring this to the board, including a lot of these comprehensive actions, the trees in the forest that you were talking about earlier, so that we all have a sense of what we want to do. And I'll make one final point before we hang up, which is that you've pointed out the absolute need for a CEO to emphasize the responsibility of communication, not just within the entity itself, but with outsiders, like to the board, stepping up communication with you, with the board meetings, but also talking with and getting information from, that's talking with, not talking to, but talking with all of the people who are using AI right now in the entity, getting ideas from people, figuring out what the responsibilities are, figuring out whether people are capable of doing their roles in relation to this new technology. So the responsibility of communication becomes almost equally up there with the responsibility of building a great strategy, because that's how you pull it all together, I think.
All right. So then let me suggest that I will, I need to think a bit about how to take the next step with the board on this subject. I think I know, I think I know where I want to be. My objective is that we have individual board members that are using these capabilities themselves by themselves to achieve meaningful things, not to just use in an offhand consumer-like way, but to use it for business purposes. They've done this. I seem to think that I know somebody who's done some videos on this subject, and I'll point them in that direction to teach themselves how to use models from a strategic business point of view.
Right.
Um, then I think that I have to figure out how do I how do I get them to do this, right? And how long is this going to take? And when can I expect that I can have a meaningful board meeting where we can have a discussion about this? So I think I have to be a bit careful because I don't want to call all the babies on the board ugly. Um, so I have to call them cute, but we need to dress you a little bit more appropriately or whatever. So I have to figure out how that change management happens. I don't think I have that answer yet. I don't think I know exactly how to do this yet, but I do know what I want the end result to be. I want the end result to be wherein, and I think it's probably the best uh, I can expect 2 months, 2 months from now, I can have the board ready to have a meeting where we can discuss technology strategy for this company in a meaningful way.
2 months it is.
Two
We'll
months.
plan on
So
that.
that gives me, let's say, the month of January and December. And let's say the middle of February, since we have holidays in here. So let's say the middle of February. So February, the mid-February would be a board meeting where we can have a discussion about tech strategy,
Mhm.
because that's what it is really. Um, and we'll worry about the agenda of this later. But then how do I get to there? I don't know how to do this yet. So for the sake of progress, why don't we meet again 1 week from today and I'll talk with you about my plan. Would it be too much to expect you to say, I'll have my senior team ready to be sitting in the room with me 2 months and a half?
In 2 months? No, that will be absolutely fine. For our conversation next week, it'll be one-on-one again, but I
Right.
will by that time have talked with all of my senior execs and have started to reach out to the communication that I was just talking about. So I'll have a better sense of how I can move forward.
So
Um,
in 1 week, you and I can get back together and you can give me your plan for the
right,
company. Okay. For your senior team.
right.
Okay. And I'll have the plan for the board.
That sounds excellent.
Okay. We've run out of our hour.
In our roles, let's step out of our roles and make a few final comments as regular old Deirdre and Tom here. And I'll jump in first that I'm sure to some of our listeners, this conversation has sounded um, not like what you might have expected when discussing something like agentic AI. What we've really been doing is clearing the ground, saying that there's much more here to this whole issue in the minds of anyone running a company than simply just installing an agent and running with it, because there are all sorts of implications. And the larger the company, especially when you have boards of directors and large staffs and multiple departments and so forth, it can get very complicated very quickly. And I worry sometimes that some companies may be proceeding without doing this thinking through. I think when you and I have our next conversation, Tom, and it'll be a slightly different conversation than what we outlined here. We were outlining in character there. But in our next conversation, talk about what the next steps going forward have to be in relation to moving this entity into the world of further the world of AI and start to pick up the use of the multiple forms of generative AI as best for this company.
Yes. So the way we envision this series, this board debate series to happen, this is this will be 71-1 for the actual board discussion. We're going to make this 1A. And next week, we'll have 1B, where we will then do what we really would have liked to have done today, which is I have a plan, you have a plan. How do we make sure they work together? And are we together to be able to go to the board to get something done, a decision made? When we began the series talking about this 2, 3 weeks ago, Deirdre, or maybe a month ago, it may not have gone quite that far back. we didn't envision this problem. We started with we should really just discuss the use of agentic AI and how we see it more as an architecture than we do as a tool. And then, as you and I both got deeper and deeper into this, we began to realize that the market sees a very different world. And we started looking at the actual uh, way that the market is being represented, both by messaging from the vendors, but also by the press, the business press, and the consumer press. And it's a very different world and way off. I think you and I would say, for the most part, off base.
Yes.
Um, and we made sure we weren't thinking about this improperly. We went straight to the sources of people that really do understand this well from a use point of view, not from a theoretical point of view,
Right.
but people that are not only theoretical, but use it every single day and build companies around the use of it and it itself on these models themselves, and even the technology behind the models to try to better understand. And we went deeply on these to make sure we were on solid ground here and we weren't terribly off base. We actually, it ended up being a bit more concerning. I think it probably raised more concerns for you and me than we had originally. And that's why we built this thing into the getting lost in the trees. We deliberately did that because you could have this discussion at a board meeting if you had the right people in that meeting talking
Mhm.
about these topics. I think that the point that we're also trying to get to is that there aren't any good sources that can help you do this from what we see. I'm sure there are plenty of consultants that can help, and I'm sure there are, and I'm sure there are plenty of companies that can help. But the ones that are obvious don't seem to be helping, at least from what they're telling us in print, or verbally in video, right? They don't seem to be helping. And at least they're not helping the way we think need to be helped. So that's at least my perspective on this and why we'll have the next discussion, which will still be between the two board top people, trying to make sure we know what we're doing before we head forward. It's another cautionary note to make sure your board is ready for this. I mean, I've been
And your
through this
company is
before.
ready for this. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you don't have a board or don't have an interested board, you can't simply implement one of these technologies. You have to do a lot of thinking about your organization itself.
Yes.
So I'll stop right
You and I
there.
have lived through this before, right? We've lived
Oh,
through
yeah.
this in organizations where certain leaders did in fact pull this off, but it was interesting that when I've seen this done well, it's been done at the individual level.
Right. Right. We should make one final point, I think, which is you mentioned that you knew someone who could show your board members how to use the
Did I
LLM.
really?
Well, that's us. You know, that's our
Oh, okay.
video 62 through 69. So go out onto the Deep Business Initiative site on YouTube, find our videos 62 through 69. If you want to see how we suggest you start to work with the basic LLMs for various real business purposes.
Yes. And, at the point, certain of the models weren't as well developed as they are now. You'll see that the current versions of these models, it's 3, 4 months later, they're much better. And now there are other models that are starting to come up. The one thing I would say though, Deirdre, I still am not comfortable with ChatGPT. I have an account, I play with it, I just am not comfortable with it. And it's probably I know too much.
Well, I think you and I both use Claude as a basic model. It's more oriented toward business anyway, to the sorts of uses we
Yeah.
use of it. But this is our individual preference, that there are so many models, and there are a lot of smaller purpose models just being generated all over the place. That the choice of a model is to the individual, how you use it, what you need it for, how comfortable you feel interacting with it.
Yes, and there are some models that have gotten way, way better.
Yes.
Um, and um, not to say that ChatGPT isn't incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful. And there are some Chinese versions that are incredibly powerful. When we need raw power, we turn to Grok. When we need synthesis and just solid work, we turn to Claude.
Right.
Um, do we use the others? Yes, we use the Google versions. Do we use the Microsoft versions? No,
Well, we have to. It's embedded in our basic business software. So,
unless we can figure out how to hack and turn it off, which
right.
is possible. Um, but yeah, it's impossible on my Windows machine. It's possible on the Mac, but not on my Windows. But um, but with that said, it's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, Tom. So long for now.
Bye, dear.